Welcome, everyone, to Los Libertinos podcast. I am your host, Carlos Abelard, and this is Chingazos and Fire episode number 58. Our guest today is David Bier. He is the Associate Director of Immigration at the CATO Institute. His work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, and many other publications. His research and writings have been cited by the U.S. Supreme Court and by multiple federal appeals courts. He's an expert on the issue of immigration. Welcome, David, to Los Libertinos.
Thanks for having me on.
Cool. So right off the bat, I like to get a background on the people that I interview. I like to say that my show is like half my tios and primos, and the other half is kind of a libertarian-friendly crowd. And maybe a little bit of the other part of the crowd are people that are just tuning in to see what's up. But for the people that might not know your background or anything about you, can you please go and give us a background of like born, raised, your family, some of your education, and then kind of how your path took you on a way to get in this immigration space?
Sure. So I'm born and raised from New Jersey, outside of Philadelphia, and my journey. I went to several colleges: Rutgers, Grove City College in Pennsylvania. I studied abroad a little bit, so that was my educational journey, and ultimately I came to the Competitive Enterprise Institute here in Washington, D.C. It's another libertarian think tank here, working on public policy. Started working on environmental policy. Realized how many nativist groups, anti-immigration organizations, population control organizations were involved in the environmental space. They thought people are the problem. If we just get rid of people, then we're going to have this beautiful environment. That's not really how it works. We need good institutions. We need people who are here to solve environmental problems, not create them. And as I got more involved in that, I got more interested in the immigration issue. Ultimately started working on immigration at CEI, Competitive Enterprise Institute. Then started working, got hired to work on immigration policy for a Congressman, Raul Labrador, on the House Judiciary Committee. Ultimately, he went up through the ranks, was vice chairman of the committee by the time I was gone, and then ultimately became the chairman of that committee. He's a former immigration attorney from Idaho. We worked on comprehensive immigration reform, trying to get bipartisan agreement on that in 2013 and 2014. Obviously, that didn't happen, but we gave it a go. 2015, became clear which direction the Republican Party was going on immigration. And that's when I got out and made my way eventually to the CATO Institute, where I've been for the last 6 years working on immigration policy and producing a lot of new research on the issue.
Cool, man. Thanks for that background. Yeah, the way that this interview came to be was that I had reached out to Alex Narashta since I had interviewed him because I wanted to kind of get his take on some of that back and forth between Marjorie Taylor Greene and you guys about the Mexican fentanyl issue. But so for sure we're going to talk about that because that's an interesting thing. And then he had kind of pointed me to an article that you wrote and all that. So we're going to get into that. But what I wanted to kind of establish first, because this is a subject that I'm very interested in. It's one that gets me hyped up, especially where in the space that I'm in, being a Latino libertarian and having a lot of Latino family members, obviously, that don't know the libertarian take or have even heard that there might be a different take on immigration. I kind of wanted to kind of tell you that, I don't know, I think you might think this is kind of funny that, so I live in between, or my neighbors are a former border agent, a migra guy, and then I live on the other side. I have an immigration lawyer, and so they both have good families. I've partied with both. We've drank and gotten drunk, a lot of good times, right?
Yeah.
And when hanging out with them, and when we get into these conversations, I tend to think like everybody kind of takes the position that is the one that is putting food on their table, whether they really deeply believe it or not, whether, whatever it is. I get that part. So I guess just to start off, I wanted to kind of ask you, um, what are the special interests in the immigration game at the highest level? Like, who are the players that fund each side? Who are the players that which side are they on, and why that is? What special interests are driving them to each to either side?
Well, look, the big picture is, party politics trumps everything else. So the biggest players on immigration are ultimately, the party consultants who are advising campaigns and coming up with messaging and deciding what kind of issues the candidates should weigh in on and run on. And so, a few years ago, 10 years ago, immigration was much more of a niche issue. So, candidates didn't necessarily have to weigh in on immigration in a very, detailed way and kind of lay out where they are. But now the vast majority of candidates are coming into office, laying out their general stance, whether they're going to be opposed to immigration or, side with the restrictionists on the issue. And so it's the campaigns and the party politics that decide so much of where people end up. They look at polling and they come up with campaign strategies around the polling, and that's true. Even at the highest levels, the Senate and even the president. Biden is a real anomaly, and we could probably talk about that. He ran super pro-immigrant, and now his main advisors are telling him you need to pump the brakes on being so pro-immigrant now that you're in office, because they don't see it as a good strategy in the long term for his reelection, I guess. So that's the biggest, component.
So it's not
Factor.
big labor or big money. There's not that doesn't drive
Yeah,
it. It's mostly
yeah.
the
No, I would not. So I would not say that the special interests, the really unique special interests, are as important as the people who do the polling and try to work on those types of strategies. If one of those people comes and says, "Look, this is not going to work. You're not going to get reelected with this messaging or whatever," that just shuts down a lot of the money interest. Now, money does influence at the margins, a big way at the margins. And so, yes, big labor, very important in the immigration space. That matters a lot especially when you're talking about a path to citizenship. Big labor is very supportive of that. But I think most Democrats would be supportive of that even without big labor money. Where big labor tends to be on the restrictionist side is on temporary work visa programs. And that's where the money actually does change positions and affect policy, because that's not an issue that most Americans care about. It's probably not going to end up in, someone's party platform for the most part. But it's an area where many Democrats move to the restrictionist side because of big labor's position. On the other side, business is the most important influence in the immigration space, both on Democrat side and on the Republican side, in terms of special interests that are in favor of immigration. So business, of course, wants to have workers. They want to have people available to them. They want their workers to have status and be able to hire them legally. And so obviously Democrats, they try to promote a path to citizenship, getting people legal status, and to a lesser extent, getting green cards for future immigrants to this country. And the pro-immigrant Republicans that there are remaining in the party, almost entirely on the side of we need to get workers for these businesses. To the extent that they're influenced in their positions by party politics, it's largely in that frame. They're not necessarily thinking about other ways of approaching the immigration issue, civil liberties or wasteful government spending, things like that, is less important to them than the fact that they have constituents in their districts where they're not able to hire somebody and they are influenced by that, or maybe they're former business owners who've experienced it directly. And then on the restrictionist side, I mean, there's just a huge amount of money being spent and raised for restrictionist advocacy at organizations like the Numbers USA. They have it's mostly a grassroots organization, but also has a lot of money from foundations that are opposed to immigration, conservative billionaires who want to give money to promote restrictionist causes. So Numbers USA, anytime there's a vote on any issue, they send out messaging saying, this is amnesty, no matter what it is, even if it's for legal immigration, it's still amnesty. And they just get, flooded with calls about, we need to stop the amnesty. So that's kind of their strategy. And then, the other think tanks on the nativist side, Center for Immigration Studies, Federation for American Immigration Reform, those are also funded by the same foundations, all have the same overlapping, they're founded by the same person. So they're all related and they're all getting the same type of money, donations from individuals who, want to see immigration restricted. And then, of course, CATO and other think tanks in DC who, focus on research sort of fall in the middle. We're influencers of people who are looking for policy solutions to problems. So a problem comes up and they're looking to our research to see what the problem is and different ways to approach it or solve the problem, or maybe there's a talking point or an argument in circulation and I want to see what research there is about that issue.
Yeah. When I first got into politics, well, no. So the first time I got into the immigration issue via politics was like, I guess it was 2006 when George W. Bush tried to pass something. And I remember like at that time, I guess my dad was like, oh, the Republicans, they don't want to pass it. And I just remember like that it was very emotional at that time in my house, a little bit about that. It was always showing on Univision or Telemundo, whatever channel they had it on. And then later on, when I got into like party politics through the Ron Paul campaign, I just remember like at these party conventions that the immigration issue, man, these people's veins would come out for like these voice votes on like party like platforms or whatever it was. And I just remember just like tripping out and being like, man, this thing is like emotional. Like I mean, everything else, but this one was the one that the energy there, it just, something just didn't rub me the right way. It just kind of felt weird. But can you talk about the like, I guess the emotional side that drives this issue? I mean, obviously it has to be the propaganda and fear and of course we can lean into the fentanyl, that being the new scare and all that. But yeah, like it's interesting to hear that you say that really the big labor and big business are on the margins, and it's really about party and really winning elections is what drives it. But the way you win elections is to get people out that are emotionally attached to an issue that go out and vote. So can you speak to like the emotional side of it through like propaganda and fear?
Absolutely. The main motivator for most voters is, the downside risk of whatever policies are being proposed. They're afraid of what the other party is going to do with power. That, I mean, is borne out again and again. Negative campaigns win the day, and that ultimately plays into fear. And so it's much easier to play on people's fears on the on the anti-immigration side. So it's hard to really gin up fear about, for most Americans, about immigration restriction. Obviously, that's, that immigration restriction kills people who are trying to come to this country in some cases, and it separates families and impacts immigrant communities very negatively. But for the vast majority of voters, that doesn't penetrate, that doesn't connect, that doesn't, bring out the emotions that you talked about of, personal concern for their communities and their families. And whereas on the restrictionist side, I mean, they're running campaign ads nonstop about how immigrants are bringing in fentanyl and drugs that are killing Americans, that they're criminals and cartel members, and they're murdering people on the streets and causing a crime wave. And so, I mean, these are the types of messages that get people out to vote and try to, prevent what they see as Biden's open borders. If we get Republicans in there, then we won't have immigrants coming in and killing people and, spreading fentanyl all around the country.
Yeah. What about yes, the propaganda for the restrictionist or the native is like to use that as an angle, to use fear as an angle, like because it works. But it also is it portrays a picture of chaos. But you know, on the side of people like on your side, you portray that the current system is chaotic. Strategically, have we ever tried to use fear in our own way to like get on message or get people I'm trying like use strategically the fear thing. I mean, it's probably I don't know. I'm trying to ask, like, why don't we paint the picture that it's chaotic now? It's chaos now. This is what's like. Why don't we use the fear angle to promote what we're trying to promote if we know that fear works so good?
Right, like I said, it's just harder. It's just more of an uphill battle to show how legal immigration or having a more open policy will promote a better outcome that will prevent these things that people are afraid of. When people see chaos, it motivates an authoritarian side of them, and there's a lot of evidence for that. Is they want people to crack down, and when they're just to take one example, when people see more illegal immigration, they're exposed to more illegal, images of illegal immigration. They are less likely to support legal immigration. So it's counterintuitive from my perspective. We should let more people in legally, so there's less people crossing the border illegally. But that's not how it works out psychologically, and it's hard to make the jump from here's chaos, people are breaking the law, and people are evading border patrol and all the rest, to that it's a second order argument. Now we have to change policies so people are incentivized to follow the rules, and so it is harder. We try to make the argument. Certainly, CATO has been leading on that point, but it is an issue that is difficult because Most of the groups who are in favor of immigration or defending immigrant rights at the border, they don't want to say it's chaotic. They don't even want to, because that's leading with a premise that restrictionists agree with. I actually disagree with that. I think it's fine to start with commonality with the restrictionist on this is chaotic and there are violations of the law happening, and that's not a good thing. And we could move to a legal immigration system that works better. But unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, the immigrant rights community has not adopted that, and I'm not sure. That's an area where I'm not sure who's right or who's wrong. But I think as a matter of fact, it is chaotic. There are violations of the law happening, and there is a better way, and that is through changing the legal immigration system to make it incentivize people to follow the rules and to enter the country the right way. So I think there is a bit of a divide between us and most of the people who are advocating on this issue.
So, what do you say for to the people, like if someone does take a step in the direction of like legal immigration, like more legal immigration? So let's just say like, oh, okay, somebody just, for example, says, okay, so our current system is chaotic. They take the point that more legal immigration might bring more order to it, but and then they'll take the next step, which is then they'll say, but if we make more legal immigration, we're just going to get more people coming in, and it's going to create the chaos again. What is your counter to that type of argument?
Well, I think the argument is based on the premise that people are coming illegally because of reasons that aren't related to the lack of legal options, and so it's just the same people who are entering illegally, who are evading detection. They have something to hide. There's some reason why they're not entering legally, and expanding the legal immigration system is just going to add to what we're already seeing at the border. And the responses are just, empirical evidence of what's happened when we have had a legal process. Yes, the numbers probably do go up in total, but the illegal numbers go down by a lot. And just to take, a couple of recent examples of this, we saw it right after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. A lot of Ukrainians were showing up at the U.S.-Mexico border to ask for asylum. Now, the vast majority of those people, the Biden administration just decided we're going to let them in legally with legal trade and travel along the U.S.-Mexico border. They didn't have to cross the border illegally because they had made the decision just to let them in, use their discretion in that way. And, there wasn't an illegal immigration problem from Ukrainians as a result of that decision. But then they took it a step further and said, we should not have these people coming to the border. They should be able to get on airplanes and fly here. All they need to do is get a U.S. sponsor in order to do that. 120,000 people signed up for this program where they could fly directly to the U.S. if they had a sponsor. And the problem of Ukrainians going to the U.S.-Mexico border went down by 90% like that. And it's, a much less chaotic situation. So yes, the numbers were higher, but the total problem at the border went down dramatically from the standpoint of the agencies who have to deal with that issue. And a second example of this, again, just under the Biden administration, was when last year we had the spectacle of Haitian immigrants at the border in an encampment. We had Border Patrol agents running around. It was probably the worst image I've ever seen at the border of border chaos, with the agents on horseback chasing people while you had lots of people crossing back and forth from Mexico with food for their families who were trapped in this encampment that Border Patrol could not contain or control. And that was there were more than 16,000 people in that encampment. and they all crossed the border illegally, and it was just a total disaster. This year, starting in the spring and going through the summer, they started to let them all in. Haitians enter the country legally at ports of entry on the U.S.-Mexico border. Just like any other traveler, they were authorized to enter the country. They were given a document. They were given a background check, and they went into the country the same way the Ukrainians were entering the country before that. And the problem went away. We went from 99.9% of all Haitians crossing the border illegally to the opposite. Now over 99% are crossing the border legally. And it's just as a result of this policy change. So we have plenty of examples of it. I mean, too many to even go into of this policy working on an individual nationality group-based level. It's just the willingness to go and say, we need to do this for everyone. We need to have a much more expansive policy that directs people in the legal pathways.
What's up, amigos? Be sure to check out our two sponsors of the show. This is a double ad. Be sure to check out the Morning After podcast with Justin and his crew. I'll put the link down below. Go subscribe and check them out. It's my white homies having a good time in the mornings, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Little politics, little sports, little um, news of the day. So put their own unique twist on it. I enjoy it. I'm on the chat sometimes. You'll catch me there. So go check that out. And then don't forget to check out LomaVerdeCBD.com. That is the CBD company that my wife owns. We have great products there. Go to the website and check out some of our new products, which are like THC 5 milligram gummies. Those will get you feeling pretty good. And we also have some sleep gummies that have THC, CBD, CBN, and melatonin. Those will also make you feel really good, cruise into sleep. So check out Morning After, subscribe down below. Go check out PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Use the promo code Chingasos, CHINGASOS, for 20% off. Thank you. Peace. Yeah, I want to get into the piece you had on in Cato. It was back in September, and it was called "Fentanyl is smuggled for U.S. citizens by U.S. citizens, not asylum seekers," and that was the some of the original, I guess, information that like either a reporter was asking Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she kind of pushed back by saying, well, that's not what I'm getting. That's not the information I'm getting from my border patrol contacts and all that. And I just figured like, well, I mean, the border patrol's not going to tell her that everything, they're going to, they want funding, so they're not going to paint a picture or, or they're not going to say that anyway. But anyway, it was your piece. Can you kind of because this was fascinating. I didn't even know a lot of this stuff. I knew that there was some like BS stuff, but I didn't know it was like that much BS about the stuff. So yeah, man, can you kind of freestyle on your piece and kind of break down any of the narratives that are out there? And because man, I was at a carne asada this past weekend. I was telling people that I was in an interview, and even the raza didn't even know a lot of this stuff that you were putting down there. Right? So yeah, please take your time and freestyle on this because your piece is interesting.
Right. So fentanyl is the main driver of the opioid crisis in the United States now. It accounts for almost 90% of opioid deaths, opioid overdoses. In the most recent, in 2021, last year, it's probably even higher this year. And the focus of the piece is basically, well, how is opioid trafficked into the United States, specifically fentanyl? And the vast majority of fentanyl comes into the country through legal ports of entry. And there's a lot of different lines of evidence that leads to this conclusion. The first is that what is actually being intercepted. So you can You only see, of course, what is intercepted, but over 90% of what's being intercepted is intercepted at ports of entry coming in. And if it was very easy to bring it in illegally, you wouldn't see the large rates of interception of fentanyl at these ports of entry. So that's the first piece of evidence. The second is that over 90% of the people who are trafficking, who are arrested for trafficking fentanyl, are U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents of the United States. U.S. citizens make up 86% of the convictions for drug trafficking. Again, this would not be happening if you could just walk around the port of entry and enter the country legally with narcotics. You wouldn't be hiring U.S. citizens for this work, who are more expensive to hire unless there's a reason for that. And the reason for hiring U.S. citizens to bring it through the ports of entry is because they're subject to a lot less scrutiny at the port of entry than someone who's entering temporarily as a tourist or temporary worker or the like. So that's why the cartels are hiring U.S. citizens, because it reduces the likelihood of the drugs being intercepted at the port of entry. And the last bit of just the theory, it makes sense. Why would you traffic narcotics between a port of entry where your likelihood of being caught crossing the border as an individual person walking across the border illegally is far higher when you're carrying drugs than at a port of entry where you can slip narcotics into your luggage? A lot of the drugs are brought in an 18-wheeler with all kinds of other products in there. It's extremely difficult to detect highly potent, highly concentrated hard drugs in legal trade travel luggage. And that's why it's virtually impossible to stop this type of trade. And according to the government itself, Customs and Border Protection, they estimate that just 2% of hard drugs, they only estimate it for cocaine, but it's probably even less for fentanyl, just 2% are intercepted at these ports of entry. And as long as the rate is that low, there's no reason to go around the port of entry. I mean, if 98% is coming through the port of entry and your likelihood of being being apprehended crossing the border illegally is something around 50%. Maybe it's lower than that. Maybe it's 40%, but you're still talking about a magnitude difference between your rate of being caught crossing the border illegally versus at a port of entry. And so the basic summary is we're not focused on illegal immigration when it comes to drug trafficking. I mean, the idea that if we could seal off all illegal immigration, it would do absolutely nothing to solve drug trafficking or prevent people from accessing fentanyl. And in fact, we've had experiments with this. During the pandemic, illegal immigration plummeted just because travel in general plummeted. And the amount of fentanyl being trafficked actually increased during the pandemic. And the reason for that is the fact that because legal travel was restricted so dramatically during the pandemic, only essential travelers were admitted. So no one on a temporary visa, no one for tourist purposes was being admitted to the United States. And so what ended up happening was, well, cartels still need to supply the same market. And so they moved from heroin to fentanyl, which is 50 times more powerful than heroin. So they could supply the same market with 50 fewer trips. And what we saw happening in the drug seizure data at the ports of entry was they went from seizing about, when you combine the heroin and fentanyl together, about a third of those seizures were of fentanyl before the pandemic. After these restrictions, after the travel was restricted, we went to 90% of the fentanyl. 90% of the seizures were fentanyl. greatly reducing the amount of heroin being smuggled. And so, as a result of that, drug deaths, drug overdoses from fentanyl had doubled over the course of those restrictions from 2020, 2021. That unfortunately, the number of overdose deaths from fentanyl has gone up extraordinarily. And so, the tragic consequence, blowback of this enforcement policy.
Wow, yeah, that's yeah, I had never heard that angle about that the COVID restrictions shifted. I mean, they're business people, they're gonna shift, I mean, the cartels are gonna shift, and then I'm assuming if the narrative is still that fentanyl's out there, they didn't shift back to heroin, right? I mean, they're gonna be like, hey, we're making money with this stuff or whatever, less trips,
Nope.
less 50 less trips, let's start, you know,
Yep.
yeah.
And now it's to the point where you have the users and the consumers basically adapted to the new drug. And so, yeah, it's so saturated the market that now we actually have people seeking out fentanyl. Whereas before the pandemic and really for many years, people were not, they were looking for heroin. They weren't looking for fentanyl. And now the market is shifted so now that people are actually wanting to consume the more dangerous product because that's what their bodies have become used to, and that's really dangerous. And of course, we think that fentanyl, that's the worst it can get. That's the worst drug we can possibly come up with. But guess what? There are drugs that are 50 times more powerful than fentanyl coming along and can be produced in the exact same way using the exact same factories and facilities in Mexico. And so the idea that if we crack down further, if we tighten up the border even more, we're going to have the same blowback effect that we've already seen play out, where we end up with a more dangerous drug that will kill even more people. And we'll have to go through this whole process again of seeing all these deaths and thinking the only solution is crack down and more restrictions.
So the whatever that new drug is called, we'll hear the new like whatever MAGA becomes in the future. That name will be the whatever name that drug is. That's how they'll keep on describing Mexicans, like they do, like
Yeah.
how they kind of, what I'm
Yeah.
saying, like how they kind of
Yep.
say fentanyl, but it really means Mexicans or whatever without straight up saying
Yes.
it. Yeah, man,
Yeah.
that's fucked up, man. So um uh Ann Coulter recently posted that I guess because she has a new book coming up called I mean, I'm sure she says it like Adios America, but Adios America. And she says she has the receipts of that the real number of illegals in our country are about 50 million. I've heard different numbers. I go with 12. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know why I go with 12. I think I've seen it or heard it or before. I don't know what is the number that you feel it is, and if somehow there was a way to justify that there's 50 million. I mean, I guess I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know the number, man. I don't know. You tell me. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think? I
Yeah.
mean, I know in my lifetime. So I'm 39. That, yeah, I mean, there is more, you know,
Yeah.
raza around. I mean, there was a time when
Yeah.
you couldn't. Anyway, yes, there are more
Yep.
people around. I know that for sure. A
Sure.
lot more primos and tios are here. But I don't know if it's that many. But I don't know what is your number, and if she again just using fear propaganda, or does she have some type of some stats that she's using to justify that higher number?
Well, 50 million is the entire foreign-born population in the United States. So, yeah, it's fear, it's propaganda, and it's really absurd, an absurd estimate. And look, a lot of people are like, well, how can we really know? People live under the radar, but we know how many housing units there are in the country, and we have census surveyors who go out and ask how many people are living in these units. So landlords are reporting this data. It shows up in, of course, these people are showing up in other types of data as well. They're having children. They would have the lowest birth rate of any population on Earth. They would have the lowest crime rate of any population on Earth if there were 50 million people. So they show up in official government statistics. And if you back out, it makes sense. So the 11 million number that you most commonly hear comes from the Census Bureau surveys of households, and people were certainly there is some underreporting that goes on when it comes to immigrants. Researchers try to account for this in certain ways by doing experiments on certain populations, see how likely they are to answer a question about this subject. So there are certain ways in which researchers have attempted to overcome the fact that immigrants are less likely to report. But at the end of the day, the big picture on this issue is you can't hide 40 million people in the United States like that. The housing units are what they are. The number of cars are what they are. These people need places to live. They need to live their lives. They're not just hiding in people's basements somewhere, not doing anything. They interact with public services. So 40 million people would show up. Now, could it be 13 million? Could it be 14 million? Maybe. And certainly over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in people crossing the border illegally. I would not be surprised if it's 12, 13 million now, whereas 11 million was the last time that most of the reputable organizations who do this type of analysis felt comfortable producing an estimate based on Census Bureau data, because during the pandemic, the census was all messed up and it was a much more difficult enterprise to collect data on this subject in 2020 and 2021. 2022 data will be much better, so we'll have a much better estimate when that comes out next year. But for right now, 11 million, 13 million, these are the range of estimates you're talking about. You can't conceal 5, 10, 20 million people, certainly not 40 million people, without it showing up all over the place. You would know if there were 50 million more people in the country than the Census Bureau thinks.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Yeah, I got jokes running through my head, but I'll keep them to myself. But yes, for sure. Like, you could not you could not hide that many of us. We definitely would come out eventually on the numbers in some way. You had mentioned earlier that you worked for a congressman, Abrador, and that you were part of writing legislation for immigration reform at the time. And you talked of that time as being kind of like, I guess you would say probably pre 2015, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah.
For the people that are doing the same stuff that you were doing at that time now, how from, I don't know if you have contacts still or something that says like, man, we can't even like how hard is it now to get some type of immigration reform? I know that on this issue, Democrats, and we could talk about how you had mentioned about how Biden. I know my dad on the previous this past election, he had said, "Oh, if we don't get immigration reform in the first 100 days, this is my last time voting Democrat." And I go, Dad, this is your last time voting as a Democrat because it ain't gonna happen. But I don't know. I was just saying that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, what is coming down the line of that maybe or something, or hey, you know what? Don't or I don't know, just false promises of the Democratic side or whatever. Whatever you want to freestyle on that vein of thought there a little bit. That question.
Well, it is a much more difficult environment. We are far more polarized than we were in 2013 on immigration. We had a lot of people who were new to Congress, Marco Rubio and others, who didn't understand where his base was on immigration. And so after he passed comprehensive immigration reform out of the Senate, he bailed on it just because he got so much negative feedback. He didn't get credit. He wasn't benefiting politically from supporting that position. And so he abandoned it as soon as he could, basically, campaigned against his own bill, and it died in the House in 2014. And nothing was produced since then that, had the support of both parties that could pass out of the Senate. You need 60 votes to pass substantive legislation in the Senate on immigration. Democrats only have 50 or 51 in this next Congress, but 50 right now. So, there was no opportunity, there was no ability for the Democrats to just say, we're going to, pass whatever we want without any Republicans. So they had to get Republicans on board. And Republicans are far more, opposed to doing things on immigration. And so what we're seeing right now, we're debating and talking about a potential deal between Senator Tillis of North Carolina, Republican, and Senator Sinema from Arizona, a Democrat, on the DREAM Act. And so they would pair the DREAM Act with, something like 25 to 40 billion dollars in enforcement spending. And, this is like basically the amount of money that was proposed in the Senate 2013 to legalize everyone in the country. So the price, inflation really took a toll on immigration reform, because now the price to get, 2 million dreamers legalized is the price that would have legalized 11 million people a decade ago. So we've really, that just shows how far we've come, where now we're sort of debating, maybe we can do something here. And the only reason that it's even being considered by Republicans is because Joe Biden is president, and they think that Joe Biden has caused this border crisis. And so if we can pass legislation requiring him to lock everybody up who crosses the border and expel them, then we can get in a better position. So legalize the dreamers, and then, close the borders and, deport everyone who crosses. And so, but even the prospect of doing that is not enough for them to get over their opposition to amnesty and, letting anybody, no matter what their circumstances were, who came here illegally, stay. So, dreamers are the population of immigrants who came to this country as children, and you think that's a no-brainer. We should legalize people who were brought here at a young age, but that's still a very difficult sell. And even when you compare it with really $40 billion is like how much the Border Patrol spends in a decade. So, this is an enormous sum of money that we're giving to this agency that's really proved inept at so many different things, and has the highest termination rate for disciplinary reasons of any agency in the federal government. And so this is a huge investment that we're providing to this agency, and yet it's still not enough for them, because they just don't want to let anyone who is in the country illegally stay.
Man, yeah, the whole thing is all messed up, man. It's unfortunate because it involves people's lives. Like I know how all this goes down, especially having family members that, you know, roll like that. I remember as a kid going with my father to go pick up a primo from the coyote, and I was like, what's going on? Yeah, you got to pay some money to bring a cousin over, and it's the way it goes. And I remember just being okay. It just wasn't. It was just. I wouldn't say it was normal, but it kind of was. But I'm sure he didn't want to come over that way. Anyway, he ended up staying, having kids, normal life, all good. But yeah, man. So yeah, I want to respect your time. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I want to just kind of let you freestyle on anything that you got coming up as far as pieces that you got coming up at CATO or anything. Feel free to plug away and any closing remarks that you want to say. And again, like I said, thank you for coming on.
Of course, the big pieces that we're going to release in the coming year are a big picture analysis of the green card process and how restrictive it is for legal immigrants, and how really the idea that we have open borders or a loose immigration policy is so far from the truth. It's almost unimaginable. We are a country that restricts about 99% of the people who would want to come legally to this country. And, that is the reality that should inform debates about illegal immigration. If we want to end illegal immigration, we need to start by making more immigration legal. And that's really the only answer to this issue.
Perfect. So for anybody that liked our conversation today, I'm going to put some links to some of the stuff that David has put out. And yeah, man, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
Peace.